I never thought the HOA president would use a stolen key to break into my house. But when she did, claiming, "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear," I made sure the next time she tried, she'd walk out of my home dripping in cobalt blue dye and shame. That day, she learned that privacy isn't a suggestion, it's a line you don't cross. It started at one of those miserable HOA meetings. You know, the kind stale coffee fluorescent lights and the faint smell of despair. I was there with my wife Sam mostly because skipping meetings in Hilton County meant waking up to surprise bylaws about flamingo lawn ornaments or mailbox fonts. But that night had a strange tension in the air, thicker than usual. Karen Granson, our queen of the HOA, stood at the podium in her stiff white suit, her smile tighter than a jar lid. She tapped the mic and announced her latest power grab routine garage integrity checks. The room went dead quiet. I could almost hear my patience snap. "So," I said, standing up, "you're saying you want to come into my garage, my home." She gave me that condescending grin. "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." That was it. "No," I said loud and clear, "not quarterly, not ever. You're not stepping into my garage." Some folks nodded quietly. Others looked away too scared to show support. Karen's smile dropped. Her voice turned to ice. The community's needs outweigh the peculiar desires of one individual. The vote passed, of course her bored cronies followed like sheep. But as I walked out, she locked eyes with me across the room and smirked. Not a friendly smirk, a promise of trouble. For a few days, nothing happened. Then I started noticing her SUV creeping past our house. Once, twice, 6 times in a single day. Sam checked the security feed, and there it was, Karen, casing our home like a predator. One afternoon, a stranger walked by, slowed near our gas meter, and studied it like he was memorizing every screw. That's when my gut twisted. 3 weeks earlier, a contractor had left a lockbox with a spare house key attached to that same gas line. I ran outside, opened the box, and the key was gone. The thought hit me like a gut punch. Karen had a copy of our key. That night, Sam pulled up our smart lock log. Yesterday, 2 to 14 p.m. She said, her voice sharp. "Manual key entry attempt. Failed." My blood froze. She'd tried to get in. She'd stood on my porch with a key that didn't belong to her. That was it. I wasn't just angry, I was done being polite. We decided to fight back the only way we knew how, with brains and a bit of petty revenge. I built what Sam called the Smurf trap. A simple setup, a bucket filled with industrial-grade blue dye mounted on a spring shelf above the front door, a thin fishing line across the threshold, and cameras watching from every angle. Legal, non-lethal, and guaranteed to stain any intruder like a cartoon villain. 3 days later, the cameras buzzed to life. Karen strutted up to my door in a blinding white suit clipboard in hand. She looked both smug and untouchable, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She slipped the key into my lock, twisted and pushed. The door cracked open. Her heel caught the tripwire. Gravity did the rest. A waterfall of blue dye exploded over her head. Her perfect blonde hair turned ocean blue in an instant. She screamed so loud the birds fled the trees. It was glorious. Sam and I watched from the kitchen, our hands over our mouths, trying not to laugh. Karen slipped on the wet porch, flailed, and dropped her clipboard into the puddle. Then she looked up, saw the camera's red recording light, and froze. The rage drained from her face, replaced by cold realization. "You'll regret this, Winters," she shouted before storming off, leaving a trail of blue footprints down the street. The video went viral in the neighborhood within hours. Sam titled it, "HOA President Has a Case of the Blues," and I'll admit it was satisfying. But I knew Karen. She wasn't the type to lick her wounds and move on. She'd come back nastier than ever. A few days later, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox, $250 in bogus HOA fines. Property damage, public hazard, and my personal favorite, harassment of a board member. I laughed, then stopped when our power went out that night. Every house on the block was lit except ours. The power company later told me the service had been disconnected by the property manager, the HOA. Karen had impersonated management to cut our power. Then came the Wi-Fi jammer hidden in our front bushes, a black box with a blinking red light professional grade. As I pulled it out, a massive guy appeared at the edge of our lawn. Bald head, heavy boots logo on his jacket, Gus's Handyman Services. "I'm here to inspect illegal modifications," he grunted. At 1 a.m, I asked, gripping my flashlight. "Board president sent me. Step off my property." He sneered. "Karen's got the cops on a leash, buddy. Don't test me." I didn't have to. Behind me came the unmistakable sound of Sam chambering the shotgun. Not pointed, just ready. Gus froze, his face draining color. "This isn't over," he growled, backing away. "Karen always gets what she wants." That was the night I realized this wasn't a feud, it was war. For a while, I almost gave up. I sat in my garage staring at the blue-stained welcome mat, wondering how it got this far. Part of me questioned if maybe I was the problem, the stubborn guy who couldn't just follow the rules. But then I remembered Karen standing in my doorway using a stolen key, looking at my home like it belonged to her. No, I wasn't wrong for protecting my family. I was wrong for thinking she'd ever stop. So I stopped playing defense. Sam and I built what she called our ghost network. New cameras, powered by batteries and 4G, no wires to cut, no signal to jam. Then I set the bait. I bought a cheap fireproof safe, filled it with bricks, a broken laptop, and a hidden GPS tracker the size of a coin. The perfect decoy. I even told my nosy neighbor Nate, "Hey, just between us, I brought some valuables home from the bank." Keeping them safe in the garage. I knew he'd tell everyone, and I wanted Karen to hear. Friday night, Sam and I went out for dinner, but parked a few blocks away, watching through a live drone feed. At 9:47 p.m., a dark van rolled up. Gus climbed out, broke into my kitchen window, and carried the safe out like Santa Claus. The tracker pinged steadily on Sam's phone. We followed it straight to a grimy pawn shop called Honest Abe's. The next morning, we confronted the owner. "We're here for a black Sentry safe," I said. He played dumb until Sam showed him a video of Gus hauling it from our house. "That's a felony burglary," she said calmly. "Option 1, you cooperate. Option 2, the cops do." Abe caved instantly. He handed over the safe and burned us a copy of his surveillance footage showing Gus selling it. We had him nailed. Now we just needed to tie it back to Karen. Sam had an idea. She zoomed in on the dye trap footage the moment the blue bucket hit Karen. There, on her fancy leather planner, was a unique starburst of dye. A few days later, on the HOA's Facebook page, Karen posted a photo from a bake sale. Same planner, same blue stain. That was our fingerprint. Then we started talking to neighbors. At first, they were terrified. But then, sweet old Mrs. Gable told us how Karen's Inspector Gus charged her $3,000 for fake attic repairs. One by one, people began sharing their own stories. Fines, threats, fake violations. 62 signatures later, we had a petition for Karen's removal under Article 9 of the bylaws. The emergency recall meeting was chaos. The beige clubhouse was packed shoulder to shoulder. Karen tried to open with her usual sugar-coated authority, but I stepped forward. "My name's John Winters," I said. "And for the last month, this board has used our money and power to harass homeowners. We've been stalked, robbed, and silenced. No more." Karen slammed her gavel. "You're lying." "Really?" I turned to Mrs. Gable. "Tell them what happened." The old woman stood up trembling and described Gus, the attic, the cash. The room exploded, people shouting, waving violation letters, years of fear boiling over. Karen screamed for order, then snapped her fingers. Gus started toward me like a guard dog. But Nate, of all people, stuck his cane out and tripped him. The big man went down face first into a table of donuts. The room erupted. Someone yelled, "Vote her out," and that was that. Karen had lost control. 10 days later came the block party, a day of burgers, balloons, and reckoning. The recall vote would be public supervised and live streamed. Sam had set up hidden cameras, drones, and 4 buckets of the same cobalt dye, each rigged above the street. Karen arrived with Gus and her cronies stomping through the crowd like stormtroopers. She slammed her hand on the voting table. "This vote is illegal," she shrieked. That was my cue. I pressed the big red button under my grill. "From 4... 20 gallons of blue dye rained down like divine justice. Karen, Gus, and the others stood frozen, drenched head to toe, their white clothes melting into dripping sapphire messes. For one perfect second, the entire street went silent, then erupted into laughter. Kids' parents, everyone who'd been bullied by that woman let out years of pent-up frustration. Then, right on time, 2 police cruisers rolled in. Detective Miller stepped out, took one look at the blue-soaked villains, and shook his head. "John," he said, "you don't do anything halfway, do you?" I handed him the flash drive, videos, transactions, witness statements, everything. He nodded, then turned to Karen. "Karen Granson, you're under arrest." They cuffed her cobalt dye still dripping onto the pavement. She looked at me, eyes full of venom, and hissed, "You think this is over? You'll regret it." But she was done. The board voted unanimously to remove her. Gus flipped for a plea deal, the cronies vanished, and the neighborhood finally exhaled. Weeks later, I pulled my mail and noticed something wet on the handle, a fresh smear of cobalt blue. One single fingerprint. Too small to be mine. Too deliberate to be random. I stared at it, the light catching the row of little blue garden gnomes our neighbors had put up, tiny, grinning sentinels born from our rebellion. Sam looked up from her desk and said, "That print wasn't accidental." I smiled, slow and tired. "Then I guess the game's not over. Sometimes you don't start the war, but if it comes to your door, you finish it."